warm welcome to another day in our talk series, Mohiniyattam on a Wider Canvas. We are fortunate to have with us today another very eminent scholar, this time in the field of Sanskrit language and literature, retired Professor Dr. C. Rajendran, who was also the head at the Department of Sanskrit in the University of Calicut. Dr. Rajendran is a prolific writer and has published a total of 36 books, some of them being The Traditional Sanskrit Theatre of Kerala, a study of Mahima Bhatta's Vyakti Viveka, Abhinaya Darpana text with study and Malayalam translation, a transcultural approach to Sanskrit poetics, Padavum Porulum, contemporary approaches to Indian philosophy, and several more. Dr. Rajendran has also won several awards for his work, for his scholarship and for his writings, such as the award for the best literary critic from the Kerala Sahitya Academy, the G.N. Pillai Endowment Award from Canada, the M.S. Menon Award for Literary Criticism, the I.C. Chako Endowment Award from the Kerala Sahitya Academy, the Kerala Panini Award for overall contribution to scientific literature, and several more. Dr. Rajendran has also been the member of several advisory boards and has been a member of the Sahitya Academy, and he has been invited as a lecturer to deliver lectures at several universities abroad. We are indeed fortunate to have Dr. C. Rajendran with us today to give us an overview of the references to dance in the Sanskrit literary tradition. A very warm welcome to Dr. Rajendran, and we also extend our gratitude.
Good evening. India has had a dance tradition of more than 5,000 years. The seal of a dancing girl recovered from Harappan civilization amply proves that even in such a hoary past, India had developed a sophisticated dance tradition. This becomes evident when we consider the demeanor of the dancing damsel. From Vedic civilization onwards, we have an attested history of performance of dance in Indian literature, which is a rich storehouse of facts related to dance, giving us a wealth of information related to performance and techniques of performance. Both literary texts and compendiums like the Natya Shastra and Abhinaya Darpana are such rich sources of information of dance as practiced and performed in ancient and medieval India. Some of these literary sources remain largely untapped, though treatises like the Natya Shastra and Abhinaya Darpana are relatively well known. It is hoped that an analysis of such textual resources will be of immense use in the understanding of the history of the performance tradition of dance in ancient India. It may be asked, no doubt on valid grounds, if the contemporary dance forms of India have any verifiable connection with the treatises and texts belonging to antiquity. It is well known that most of these performing arts, whether it be Bharatanatyam, Mohiniyattam, Kuchipudi, Kathak, Manipuri, or Odissi, are regional art forms which have come into existence at a relatively later date in the medieval times. The earliest seminal text is Natya Shastra, and it is silent about most of these dance forms. and even Bharatanatyam, which remains one of Bharata and his treatise, cannot be traced to any valid textual source like Natyashastra or any other work like Chilappadikaram of such an early date. Natyashastra is more or less focused on Natya, comprising Sanskrit drama, and it gives only a peripheral account of dance forms, let alone mentioning the names of these regional dances. Later texts like Abhinaya Darpana rarely mention any contemporary dance forms. In view of these facts, one can quite legitimately question the methodology behind tracing modern art forms to the alleged Natyashastra roots. In answering this question, we have to be clear about the role of tradition in the evolution of performing arts in a given culture. No art form can originate in a clean slate where all traces of tradition are completely erased. This is largely true in the case of dance forms of India, which retain many of the traditional elements going back to remote antiquity. We may discount regional innovations in costume, conventions, and themes, but the stamp of Indianness on Indian dances, which is manifestly present in them to alien eyes, could be traced to at least two Indian key concepts. These are related to the emotional orientation and body language of the dances, and they are linked inexorably with the two concepts of Indian performing arts, namely rasa and abhinaya. So far as this basic structural framework is not displaced, one does not miss the umbilical cord which connects tradition with modernity. This exploration of roots of performing arts need not necessarily be an academic pursuit devoid of any tangible artistic purpose. Traditional perceptions of art are of great significance in the understanding of the very dynamics of art forms. Many of the techniques we have to take for granted may appear in a new light when inputs from tradition enrich our understanding. To cite an example, a person not conversant with Kacheri tradition of South India may feel a bit impatient when the violinist or the mridangist start tuning their shruti to the basic drone, which could take some time. One may wonder why these people have not finished all these sundry preparations which had to be made before. Imagine the violinists and pipers of a Western concert start tuning their instruments in the beginning of a concert in front of the eager and impatient audience. But if we go through the 5th chapter of Natyashastra, which describes the Purvaranga ceremonies, there is an item called Ashravana, which is the adjustment of the instruments, and another item called Parikhatana, which is the due adjustment of strings of musical instruments. And Ranga Puja survives in all performance traditions till date. Thus, our engagement with the textual traditions may sometimes help us to understand conventions and techniques in a better manner. Most of us have the experience of automatically keeping beats when a beautiful song is played. And some of us may naturally feel that our body as a whole becomes a part of the melodious and rhythmic experience. It is as if dance is the logical culmination of music. This integral perspective is never lost sight of in Indian tradition, as dance, song, and instrument are seen clubbed together under the head Shilpa, as in Kaushidaki Brahmana. Trivit Vai Shilpam Nirtam Geetam Vaditramiti. The ancient ideal of dance seems to be that of a tree gracefully being tossed by a gentle wind, which results in its entire limbs partaking in a coordinated movement. This type of bodily movement is called shakha or branch metaphorically. And as we shall see, Kalidasa has used this beautiful expression shakha yonihi mruduhu abhinayaha to describe the tender and all-pervasive movement of the dancing Malavika. Ancient Indian treatises constantly make a distinction between dramatic performance natya, pure dance nrtta, and pantomime nritya. Natya is defined by Dhananjaya as avasthanukriti or imitation of various situations. Imitation, however, is a very problematic word with Aristotelian connotations, and aestheticians like Abhinav Gupta point out that anukarana is imaginative representation, not blind copying. Pure dance movements devoid of any emotional significance and based simply on rhythm and time, tala laya shrita, is designated nritta, from which nritya or dance based on emotional states, bhavashraya, is sought to be carefully distinguished, though the distinction is often overlooked in modern usages. Suffice it is to say that in modern concerts of art forms like Bharatanatyam and Mohiniyattam, there are items based exclusively on rhythm and exclusively on emotive themes. The latter has melodious songs which may be absent in the former. It seems that ancient treatises were quite familiar with a lot of regional varieties of dances in such a vast geographical territory like India. So, sociologists of yesteryears toyed with the idea of little tradition and great tradition, though this hierarchical concept is nowadays discarded. However, somewhat similar is the distinction made in works like Dasharubhaga between marga, the path, and local style, deshi, which again resembles the standard language and local variations accepted in linguistics. What is remarkable in this concept is the readiness of theoreticians to accommodate variations in dance styles, which stands in stark contrast with modern claims of the exclusive authenticity of certain styles of individualistic preferences. We shall go a long way in promoting pluralism in our dance culture if we are to retain this accommodative spirit. Another interesting distinction made in ancient texts is between what could be loosely described as the masculine and feminine forms of dance. These are called Tandava and Lasya respectively. According to Abhinaya Darpana, Tandava is a style of dance taught to Bharata by Shiva through Tandu. Lasya, on the other hand, was taught to Usha by Parvati. Kalidasa records that these two styles were bifurcated and placed in the two parts of his body, the masculine and the feminine, in the Ardhanarishwara form by Lord Shiva. Kalidasa in his Megha Sandesha refers to the terrific cosmic Tandava dance performed by Lord Shiva in Mahakala temple. However, when he describes the performance witnessed by Shiva and Parvati after the solemnization of their marriage, the tone and tenor of the description suggests that what they watched was Lasya, performed by Apsaras or water nymphs, consisting of graceful Angaharas, Lelidanga Hara. Tandava according to Abhinaya Darpana, consists of haughty Karanas and Angaharas, and it has the dramatic style called Arabadi, which is suitable for emotions like Raudra and Veera. On the other hand, Lasya consists of graceful bodily movements and Angaharas, and Kaishigi, the graceful style, is appropriate for it. It is evident from all this that ancient treatises had a holistic view of dance styles when they define these in terms of Karanas and Angaharas. Karana is a unit consisting of gestures, postures, and major as well as ancillary limbs, Angas and Pratyangas. A combination of 4 to 8 Karanas is called an Angahara. Bharata has devoted an entire chapter called Tandava Lakshana to describe 108 Karanas. It is significant that the representation of Karanas is found in great temples of the south like Chidambaram, Brihadishwara and Kumbhakonam. And stalwarts like Dr. Padma Subramaniam have made breakthroughs in research and performance with inputs from tradition on this. How far the distinction between Lasya and Tandava would be relevant in modern drama discourses is an interesting question. We could, for example, understand an art form like Kathakali in terms of the concept of Tandava to a certain extent. On the other hand, if we look at Mohiniyattam as a form of Lasya dance, it could throw some light to the nature of the dance. Of course, overlapping is bound to happen in such broad generalizations. However, if Kathakali strays into too much of soft and tender emotions to the exclusion of combative and violent ones, or if Mohiniyattam is geared up to represent war scenes and the like, we may feel that they have moved out of their legitimate territory. Such questions will definitely crop up in the choreography of new items in dance, and the genre the artist selects should depend upon propriety. Natya Shastra no doubt speaks about various aspects of dance like Lasya and Tandava, Angahara and Karana, as well as vrittis like Kaishigi and Arabadi. However, one cannot help forming the impression that dance is not treated as an autonomous or independent art, but as an ancillary of drama. The various elements of Tandava dance are described as a part of the preliminary rituals. Lasyangas are treated as elements of Nadaga. This is understandable since Natya Shastra generally has the same perspective with regard to other arts like music also. We have to turn to works like Abhinaya Darpana to find out features of dance as an independent art form. According to Abhinaya Darpana, dance is an auspicious act to be performed by a beautiful and accomplished dancing girl in an assembly attended by a king and a knowledgeable audience. This seems to be interesting as a text, one of the earliest treatises on dance, does not specifically mention temples or devadasis who are usually associated with dances, suggesting that probably these are later developments. The obvious relation between dances and the royal court is indicative of the royal patronage. There are imaginative accounts of dance performances in works written by gifted poets like Kalidasa, who are versatile in their knowledge and taste. One such example is, as we have already pointed out, the vivid description of a piece called Chalika, which has overt and covert meanings and which is performed by the beautiful Malavika, a princess who has to live like an attendant in the harem in front of the king. The beautiful piece, composed in the Maharashtri dialect of Prakrit, describes the plight of a girl in love who is very diffident about her lover's reciprocal love, but to whom all omens reassure that her lover in his turn loves her. This dance is performed as a part of a competition of two teachers, Natyacharyas, Haradatta and Ganadasa. The description of Malavika's dance brings forth the features of an ideal dancer in Kalidasa's perspective. The gesticulations are pregnant with speech. Angaihi andarnihita vachanehi sujita samyagartha. And they convey the sense quite effectively. The gait accompanies the rhythm. There is perfect involvement in the emotion. The tender gesticulations grow from one limb to another, like movement passing from one branch of a tree to another. Here Kalidasa also speaks about the transition from one mental state to another in a spontaneous manner, with the basic mental state or Sthayi Bhava remaining unchanged. This could be an ideal which would inspire any dancer of any time. Ease, elegance, softness, rhythm, and dynamism are the qualities emphasized by Kalidasa in his beautiful description. At the thematic level, the structural analysis of the various types of heroines, messengers, and the like seen in texts like the Natya Shastra may appear to be mechanical, but they are of great use in providing insights to the very structure of dances based on Jayadeva's Gita Govindam and Padam's dilating on various phases of love. Generally, composers do not violate inherent norms related to the depiction of heroes, heroines, and messengers, and an awareness of these principles will definitely add to the psychological and aesthetic dimensions of dancing. Shastra texts present crystallized wisdom of tradition gained through experience, and which will help one to understand the significance of various techniques. To quote one instance from Abhinaya Darpana, Asyena alambayet geetam, hastena artham pradarshayet, chakshurбhyam darshayet bhavam, padabhyam talam acharet. Yado hastas tado drishtihi, yado drishtis tado manaha, yado manas tado bhavaha, yado bhavas tado rasaha. Here the very technique of dance is presented in a nutshell. Mouth should support song, hand should show the meaning, emotion is conveyed through the eyes, the feet represent rhythm. A chain of action starting from hands, moving to the eyes, the mind, the emotion, and finally to the rasa or the aesthetic state is depicted beautifully in the second verse. Dancers of modern times face tremendous challenges in adapting themselves to the norms of contemporary society, even while retaining the spirit of tradition. Attitudes, tastes, patronage, and reception in relation to classical art forms have changed. And if the artist is not capable of reinventing her art to suit to changing times, there is a risk of the art itself dying out. A judicious blending of tradition and innovation may be necessary to ensure organic growth of any classical art, and here traditional perceptions could be of immense help. Thank you very much.
We are grateful to Dr. Rajendran for sharing his insights with us on the topic of references to Indian dance in the Sanskrit literary tradition. It was noteworthy that Dr. Rajendran mentioned how tradition can serve as a source of renewal and can help us understand our contemporary practice in a better way. And at the same time, he also it was interesting how he mentioned that uh, we should not take tradition, we should not take these references in Sanskrit texts to have an authoritative value. And he spoke about the importance of openness to change and the openness to allow an organic growth of the different dance forms, which alone can ensure that there is a plurality of styles. So that was really a very enlightening talk. Thank you, Dr. Rajendran, for being with us.